Guy and Robin had no time to celebrate. Things were looking grim. They had a small handful of rocks, the headless statue, and nothing else to put into the sling. Robin darted around the empty stable, scooping up 2 large grain sacks, starting to fill them with straw and gravel, but they would do no good, and Guy could see that Robin knew it. "We're sitting ducks here," said Guy. "We've got to get away." "But they'll follow us," said Robin. "They'll catch us up. We don't stand a chance." "Then we face them here," said Guy. "We go out fighting." Robin considered for a second. "Yeah," he said. "All right." Guy put a hand on his shoulder. "Robin, you should take Lord Brackenbury's sword." "I can't," said Robin, shaking Guy off. "He died with it in his hand," said Guy. "A knight to the last. We're fighting for his castle. He'd have wanted you to have it." Robin nodded slowly. "Maybe," he said. "But you're the real knight, Sir Guy. Maybe you should have it." Guy sighed. "Fine, I'll have it. Can we just get on with this?" Robin grinned. "We haven't used all the rocks yet," he said. "And still take a few of them down." Guy frowned. "Oh, that's going to make all the difference." They didn't have to wait long. The mercenaries lined up on the far side of the river. They had brought a battering ram with them, a great long tree trunk with branches cropped to use as handholds. It would make short work of the castle's gate. 3 of their number walked slowly across the rickety bridge and made their way up towards the castle gateway. There were 2 tall men in heavy armour, and between them a third, slender figure in a long grey cloak and hood. "They've taken a hostage," Guy whispered to Robin. "What are the local people?" "I don't think so," said Robin. "Whoever that is, it's not a prisoner." Guy stared out with narrowed eyes. "I've got a very bad feeling about this," he said, quietly. The third figure walked easily, arms folded, and Guy realised the mercenaries took their cue from this unarmed figure. Thin, delicate fingers reached up to the grey hood. Guy and Robin both gaped in amazement. Lady Isabella of Gisborne, now the Sheriff of Nottingham, shook her long dark hair and stared up at the castle walls with a cruel smile. Robin turned to Guy. "They're working for Isabella," he whispered. "Nice to keep it in the family." "She's amassed her own private army," Guy nodded. He sounded impressed. "This isn't going to end well." "What are you going to do about it?" Robin asked. Guy looked at him. "What am I going to do about it?" "Well, she's your sister," Robin said. Guy opened his mouth to reply with a choice comeback, but Isabella cut him short.
"I'm told you fought bravely,"
she called up to the battlements.
"but you're fighting with straw. Perhaps that's all you've got to throw at us."
"She's not stupid," Guy whispered to Robin. "Not everything runs in the family, then," Robin said under his breath.
"But you don't know who you've been fighting."
Isabella called again.
"I'm Isabella of Gisborne, the Sheriff of Nottingham. I have the full authority of Prince John, brother to the King. You will open your gates now, or you will be deemed traitors."
"I wonder if the Prince even knows about this lot," pondered Guy. "What do we do?" asked Robin. Guy considered, surprised at Robin's willingness to give up his supposed authority. "Maybe we can talk our way out of this. I know her." "We can't let her see that it's us up here," said Robin. "She does want us both dead." "You more than me," said Guy, almost smiling. "That's debatable," said Robin. "We stick with the plan. Use the last of the rocks, try to scare them off." "It's not going to work," Guy told him. "Isabella is very determined." "Well, that's one word for it," grinned Robin. "But have you got a better idea?" "No," said Guy. "Come on, then." They hurried back down the steps into the courtyard. Isabella shouted another warning at them, a last chance for them to surrender. They ignored her. Between them, they lifted the heavy, headless statue and heaved it into the sling.
"All right,"
shouted Isabella crossly.
You've given me no choice.
Robin glanced up at Guy. They turned to look at the closed gate just as the pounding began. The impact echoed around the castle courtyard, but the gateway took the blow. Robin worked quickly, adjusting the ropes to compensate for the weight of the statue. "Too much," said Guy, trying to stop him. "But it's heavier than straw," said Robin, pushing him away. "Yeah," said Guy, "but I loaded the straw bale up with rocks too. You're going to land that thing in the river." "I know what I'm doing," said Robin, and he yanked back on the lever. Guy leapt back as the sling whipped round, hurling the headless statue high over the castle walls. The headless man spun as he flew and disappeared behind the battlements. They waited a second, and then heard a tremendous splash. "See?" said Guy. "Yeah," grinned Robin. "You wasted the shot," said Guy crossly. "You think?" said Robin. The battering continued at the gateway. They heard the hinges creak and groan in protest. It wasn't going to be long now. "Get the sword," said Guy. "Right," said Robin. "Give me your boots." Guy turned to him. "What?" "Think of it as a trade." The battering ram smashed against the gateway, and one of the hinges broke from the wall. The mercenaries let out a cheer, but the locking mechanism still held. They battered again with renewed vigour. "No time to argue," said Robin. "Give me your boots." Eyes on the gateway, Guy did as he was told. They needed the sword, and whatever Robin felt he had to do to appease the spirit of the dead man, Guy would have to go along with. He tugged off his riding boots, leaning on the trebuchet for support. It creaked under his weight. His feet sank into the mud of the courtyard, squelching between his toes. Robin scooped up the muddy boots and headed into the keep. Guy began loading the sling with the last of the rocks. His whole body ached with exhaustion and hunger, but a fury burnt deep within him. They were going to die, him and Robin Hood, and Isabella would have beaten them. But they were going to go out fighting, like the knights in the tales he'd been told as a boy. A lot had happened to Guy in this past year. His whole world turned upside down, but he found himself content, ready to meet his maker, to find peace at last. He and Robin going out fighting. Only not fighting each other. Funny how things turn out. Robin dashed out of the doorway of the keep and across the courtyard towards him. Guy stared at him in amazement. "You've forgotten the sword," he said. "No," said Robin. "I left it behind on purpose." The battering ram smashed against the gate again and another hinge snapped from the wall. The ram had also made a great dent in the door. They were almost through. Robin picked up the sacks he'd started to fill with straw. He emptied them quickly. "Get the rocks out of the sling," he said. Guy felt almost numb. He began to scoop the rocks out of the sling, dumping them on the muddy floor. And to his amazement, Robin then climbed into the sling himself. "Come on," he said. "It's our way out of here." He began pulling the cloth sack over his feet and legs. "You've got to be kidding," said Guy. "It'll never work." "It's got a chance," said Robin, heaving the sack over his shoulder so only his head peeked out. "Better odds than we've got with that lot." Guy looked back at the gateway. The wood splintered. He could see the mercenaries' legs through the gaps. He found himself climbing into the sling beside Robin. "Get this over you," said Robin, handing him the other sack. Guy struggled to get his bare muddy feet and legs into the thing while pressed up beside Robin. The sling quivered and swayed under their weight like sharing a too small hammock. "Gotta get this right," said Robin, reaching forward to adjust the ropes. "We must be about 5 stone more than the statue, yeah?" "Maybe 6, said Guy, and his head whipped up at the sudden crash from the gateway. The battering ram had smashed through the gate, an explosion of crude fragments and dust and splinters. "Too late," muttered Robin, and suddenly yanked at the lever. Guy's stomach fell into his mouth as he and Robin were launched into the sky. He just had time to see the mercenaries racing through into the courtyard far below him. Then he closed his eyes tight. The canvas bag stopped him from flailing around and he couldn't even squeeze out a cry. They shot up and up, the air pressing hard against them. And then Guy could feel them slowing, and the energy of the earth dragging on them. The breath squeezed from his lungs in a sigh. And then he was falling, twisting over and falling. He dared to open his eyes for an instant, and he saw the bright sky, then the tops of the trees, then the ground far below, then the sky again. He heard Isabella shouting orders to the mercenaries, telling them to search the keep. And then he hit the water. The river was fast flowing, cold and deep. Guy let it embrace him, glad of the soft landing. But then he was sinking, his arms and legs caught up in the canvas bag. Water filled his mouth and nostrils as he fought to get himself free. The river bed bumped against him, and he felt himself sinking down into the mud. He wrenched an arm from the sack and fought to free himself, but after all the hard work and lack of food, he didn't have the strength. Then, a hand grabbed him by the wrist and heaved him from the riverbed. Guy kicked with his legs, waggling them out of the sack. He let Robin lead him up to the surface, exploding out into the cold air. Gasping, lungs raw with pain, he felt the joy of just being alive. They'd survived. Against all the odds, they'd survived. The river was carrying them downstream quickly, round and away from the castle. They let it take them, too tired to resist the current. Robin's breath was ragged, exhausted. And then they heard the most appalling cry. The mercenaries inside the castle howled with terror.
Wait!
They heard Isabella shouting.
Wait! What did you see?
Robin and Guy were a long way downstream now. They just had time to see burly mercenaries fleeing for their lives over the rickety bridge. Then the river veered off round a corner and carried Robin and Guy deep into the forest. Guy twisted in the water to look round at Robin. Robin, pale and exhausted, was still grinning that grin.